All right, thanks for joining us. I'm going to turn this over to Jenny, who's going to kick us off today.
Thank you, Jeannie. Good morning, everyone. I am Jenny Hom Franzen, Executive Director of the Asian American Advertising Federation, also known as 3F. Welcome to our webinar on advancing inclusivity in survey research and bringing Asian American voices to the forefront. I want to first thank AARP and NORC for organizing this webinar on this very critical topic. As we all know, amplifying our voices is more important than ever. We need to advocate for diverse communities. For those of you who don't know, 3AF is a leading resource when it comes to Asian advertising, Asian marketing, and the power of the Asian American consumer. You can find out more about 3AF on our website at 3af.org. Please feel free to follow us on social media as well. My email is on there, so feel free to contact me if you have questions. Wanted to invite you all to our biggest event of the year. It's what we call 3F Asian Marketing Summit, May 29th and 30th in Greater Dallas, largest national conference focusing on the Asian consumer segment. And in fact, this topic that we're covering today will also be one of our program topics at the summit. I hope to see you there. For today's webinar, let me introduce our speakers. Can we show the slide, please? Thank you. We have Alex Chu, Amplify AAPI Director, Amerispeak NORC, Angela Houghton, Manager Audience Research at AARP, Bill Amata, Founder, Chairman, and Chief Connectivity Officer of IW Group, David Dutwin, Senior Vice President, Amerispeak, Chief Scientist and Center Director, NORC, and Vivian Peng, Lead Data Scientist, Innovation, the Rockefeller Foundation. In terms of questions and answers, we will have time for Q&A at the end, so please feel free to put your questions in the chat box, and we will get to as many of the questions as we can. And now let's show the TikTok video, which was created about a year ago to start the program.
So you might be seeing in the news that unemployment rates are decreasing for white New Yorkers, but increasing for Black New Yorkers.
And it's clear that we need to do something about that.
But what do you do if your demographic group isn't included?
As you can see in this report, Asian American and Native Hawaiian Pacific Islanders are not even mentioned, just general BIPOC. And we see this happening over and over again.
I'm Taz.
I'm Vivian, and we're Asian
and data scientists at the Rockefeller Foundation.
Let's talk about how this happens and why. This report did not include Asian New Yorkers because of in-group variance, which means that there is a wide range in unemployment rates within this group.
But when we do have data, it's often at the aggregate level, which can be really challenging because you're looking at Asian Americans as a whole. We'll be looking at a 2020 study that talks about what kind of information can go missing when you do view Asian Americans as a monolith. And we'll be doing that with the helpful aid of Skittles!
Each of these Skittles represents a subgroup. In 2020, the unemployment rate for Nepalese New Yorkers was 22%, which is the highest across all of New York. But when you take that rate and average it across all other AANHPI groups, like Japanese, Korean, Chinese, the overall unemployment rate for Asian New Yorkers drops down to 12%.
Now imagine how much more information you lose when you further aggregate to BIPOC. So Vivian, what can we do and where do we start?
Data disaggregation is the goal, but in order to get there, we have to be able to collect data first. That's why the Rockefeller Foundation is one of the early funders for Amplify AAPI, which is the first survey panel designed to help researchers better represent this community.
To learn more about Amplify AAPI, please take a look at our caption.
Great. I think I'm on. Hi, everyone. I'm Vivian, a data scientist from the Rockefeller Foundation. Thank you for watching this video. I'm happy it's still relevant and being talked about a year after it was made. So I'm here today to share and talk about our journey with Amplify AAPI from making the grant all the way through to running surveys on the panel. So I come from a background working in public health and in the government, and have always felt the problem of data inequity and underrepresentation so deeply. And it was really frustrating to feel like there's nothing we can do. So once I joined the foundation, I was really happy to start talking to NORC about the survey panel. At the foundation, our mission is to promote the well-being of humanity by breaking down the barriers that limit who can be healthy, empowered, nourished, well-off, secure, and free. And that comes with being able to first identify those unmet needs. And in order to do so, we need to have the data. So the survey panel is a great step towards bridging that gap. And we got into this work because we were interested in food access in the United States and noticed through our research that the AANHPI population was historically left out of research and or underrepresented. So in addition to the grant, it was a priority for us to also be able to run surveys. And we did 2 surveys that looked at food and nutrition security, as well as understanding the cultural relationships to food so that we can help inform our program strategy and how to reach and engage with this population. It has been such a wonderful experience working with NORC to make sure our questions are actually addressing the things that we're interested in identifying, and also working with them to understand, is this asked in the right tone, the right reading level, and also being able to translate it across different languages. So we have the results back from our surveys, and we're really excited to be able to share them soon. Taz, my co-lead, who you saw in the video, we've been working on the analysis, and we'll be sharing the results of the survey in May next month for AANHPI month. So stay tuned for that. Just to get us to start thinking through and imagining what kinds of questions you could ask on the survey panel, we're going to be releasing a poll. So welcome to answer. And the question is, what challenges do you face in effectively reaching out to AANHPI audiences with your marketing campaigns? So polls should pop up, and happy to look at your responses. So curious to hear if you are experiencing a lack of relevant data insights, limited understanding of cultural nuances, or difficulty in segmenting diverse AANHPI subgroups with insufficient resources for target marketing efforts. So I'll just give a couple, maybe a minute or so left for the poll or other. And if you have other, welcome to put into the chat what that other would be. So it looks like the majority are facing difficulty in segmenting diverse AANHPI subgroups. So that's, the whole point of the video we talked about earlier was data disaggregation. And in order to do so, we need more data and we need more participants in the panelists. So that's what we'll be talking about today. But equally also important for others is like lack of relevant data and limited nuance, understanding of cultural nuances. So with that, I think we're going to hand over to the NORC team to talk about Amplify AAPI.
I think I'm up actually. So I'm going to jump in ahead of before we hand it over to Alex to come in and talk for NORC. I'll just say a little bit. My name is Angela Houghton. I am a manager of audience insights at AARP in the research department there. And we really focus on racial and ethnic population research in that group. And if you can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. I'm going to talk a little bit about our role here, why AARP feels that this is important. And we really see data equity and Amplify AAPI as a solution that's really critical to our social mission. So I'll start for a minute just sort of talking about this backdrop that why we're even all talking about this, and we're excited about this solution of Amplify, and probably many of you on this call are already familiar, but we're talking about a population of 20 million people, and it's the fastest growing racial demographic in our country right now, and yet we still are really facing few and far between meaningful and accurate surveys of the Asian American and Pacific Islander populations. And so I think, it's very common for us to come across survey data, whether it's our own surveys or we're trying to use public data where there is simply no data for this population, or it may be combined with all other and in the generic other bucket of racial and ethnic identities, which really renders it meaningless. If it is there and reported, then maybe it's only aggregated up at the total population level, which of course is a problem. And the goal would be to have disaggregated data for the purposes that just Vivian just sort of shared in the video and talked about, and you all reflected in your poll results too. And then I think also, though, when we even do have data, it's most often when we're talking about survey in a survey context, it's only conducted in English. I mean, English and Spanish are kind of table stakes for survey research now, but there really is not a lot of concerted effort to conduct survey research at a cost-efficient way, anyway, in the Asian languages. So that really leads us to having data that is biased and is inaccurate. And so this ranges from everything from public opinion and sentiment to consumer experiences, needs and wants, behaviors of people. I think during COVID, that was a very salient example of data that we had that really was being reported in the public domain, but did not reflect what people knew was happening on the ground and in communities where according to the data, it didn't really look like Asian American communities were being so impacted negatively by COVID, but yet that didn't match what was being experienced. So again, as I said, wants and needs of consumers are not known, and there's white spaces and unexplored opportunities for market growth and innovation, and even just population descriptives and characteristics. So this leads to sort of stereotypes and assumptions about who are Asian Americans, who are Pacific Islanders. It allows disparities to go undetected and discrimination to be perpetuated. So that's sort of like just recapping the why and the problem. And for AARP, if you go to the next slide, please. For our organization, we also, we're a social mission organization, and we're about advocating for older adults and creating a society where everyone can choose the way that they live as they age. And so data informs and enables our advocacy, but if we do not have that, we're not able to deliver on that for all communities. And we recognize that when communities are allowed to remain unseen or invisible in the data, then that's an inhibitor to us to advocate on their behalf. We're also a membership organization, and we have a consumer brand, and our consumer commitment is to be a wise friend and fierce defender to people age 50 and older. And without the data to know what their needs are or how well we're meeting them, it really constrains us. We cannot set KPIs for this key population segment as we would do with other population groups, although that is the expectation of organizational leadership. And so it's kind of a catch-22 situation where we found ourselves really trying to ask for additional investments for our Asian American and Pacific Islander advocacy and community engagement, but without the data to show the impact, it's a little bit of a non-starter organizationally when you're looking for resources. And to deliver an end-to-end member experience that's culturally and linguistically resonant for the communities without the data we were really, it's a challenge. So we said, we cannot be the only organization facing this. We know that there's many community leaders who have for decades been fighting for data equity and data disaggregation. And so how can AARP, what is the opportunity for us to kind of join and add our how could we marshal resources toward this collective goal? If you go to the next page, next slide, please. So we sort of said there was a few things we could do both as a funder and a convener to help develop a systemic data equity solution and disrupt the status quo for data. And so that we don't continue to just struggle in this, inadequate data ecosystem, but actually become part of marshaling a solution. So we could participate in raising awareness and growing demand for better data, much like this webinar now, and also finding solutions to lower cost barriers and build capacity within the field. So we knew we couldn't do that alone. We would have to be joined by many others, which is kind of how we've been trying to reach out and build a network and bring others in to join. So thrilled to have everyone on this call and all of the supporters of Amplify coming together to really contribute to bringing this to market. So really, if you go to the next slide, please, coming to the idea of Amplify AAPI, which was where we really said, let's join with NORC and see how we could support bringing this first of its kind, probability, high quality data resource for conducting survey research. And we've come a long way over the past few years, and this timeline kind of shows where we are. Last year, I was able to attend the 3AF annual conference and talk to the audience there and let people know this was coming and how excited we were about the potential for it. We've been really busy, and NORC's been really busy since 2023, launching the panel, having the first surveys run on the panel, standing up an advisory council, and really building momentum both from funders as well as people using the panel, and having an ability now to have a constant source of public opinion data for AAPI communities, and anyone being able to come and conduct survey research and collect data for these communities on this panel. We want to continue to grow. We know we haven't been able to quite yet reach the full dream of full disaggregation, but as Vivian talked about, needing to start somewhere and first having this resource for in-language recruitment and survey completion. So I'm really excited now to let us all hear from Alex, who will tell us about the capabilities of the panel now and some of the impact that it's had to date.
Thanks, Angela. Hi, everyone. I'm Alex Chu, Amplify API Director at NORC. Next slide. So it's a privilege to be here today. Before I get into the capabilities, I just want to share some background on my journey to get here. I've been in the market research industry on the agency side for a little over 20 years, and I just recently joined NORC. And one of the main reasons I joined NORC and Amplify API was this shared vision to be part of helping and empowering other organizations and corporations to hear our voices and to tell our stories. Back when I started doing research, this is when we were doing paper surveys were still common. I noticed right away there was no interest in the Asian demo. It was black and white. A few years later, it was black, white, Hispanic, but the AA and NHPI were always categorized as other. And there are a number of reasons, right? Lack of interest, cost of recruiting, small number of AA and HPIs in the panel. So it's really been a journey and, quite frankly, a battle, at least with my previous roles, for the AA and HPI community to be seen in research. So it started over a decade ago. I started having conversations about representation and, there really was no interest. I would check back every few years with the same result. Then the pandemic happened. The media began to cover the Asian hate stories. The community's voices were more centralized and louder. And I finally got that green light to do research on the community and their perceptions. But even then, it was, only using free space, limited budget on a non-probability omnibus, which meant, not being able to do oversample to get reliable numbers and completed surveys. And, especially dealing with that dreaded asterisk, which is like low sample size for directional purposes only next to the AANHPI data. So while that was a good start, it wasn't nearly enough to get accurate data to tell our stories. So, I truly believe we're at this inflection point for research for the community, whether it's seeing products in stores, going to the movies and seeing our stories on the big screen. There's a demand for our stories and our narratives to be told. And I'm really excited for Amplify AAPI to be that vessel to get our voices out there. Amplify AAPI is the largest, most representative public opinion panel of AA and NHPI, and it's the most rigorous scientific approach in putting the panel together and executing surveys. I'll get a little more into the details later. So where will this vision take us? What's my vision? What's our team's vision here? I think it's about continuing to break these barriers by creating more representation where there was limited data representation in the past, which perpetuated harmful stereotypes and racial inequality. It's about encouraging the ad specialists, marketers, communicators to push for messaging, ads, narratives, and products that tell our stories and to be measured in the proper way. I think it's about growing and raising awareness of this panel so we can tell the different type of stories, as Vivian and Angela were mentioning, for the many different AA and HPI communities. On the next slide. So going into the details, Amplify API is unique, right? Some quick details about the rigor behind this panel. It consists of a probability sample in which households are randomly selected. Interviews are conducted in English, Mandarin, Cantonese, Korean, Vietnamese, in which 92% of the AA and NHPI households are offered a language which they are comfortable with. In addition, it can be taken in online, phone, or mail. In our monthly polls, which are open to anyone, we're able to get 1,000 completed surveys of the community in the US, and we're hoping to grow that number to 3,000. On this slide, and I know it's, the font is small, but we wanted to provide a sense of some of the demographics that are accessible through the panel. In addition to, your usual demos like gender, age, household size, there's also nativity, languages spoken at home, Asian origin, online behavior, like social media use, as well as personal profiles, as you can see here. And the Amplify AAPI panel is always evolving to be more inclusive. We're listening to our panel members to help this panel evolve as well. As you can see on the bottom there, we just recently heard from our panel members that we should capture more languages at home. So we added languages like Punjabi, Thai, and Indonesian. Our goal is really to grow this out to be as inclusive as possible for the whole community. Next slide. So here you see the different types of questions and topics we are covering. What started more as social justice and politics, has now brought into healthcare, finance, caregiving, media habits, and engagement. Many of these associations and foundations will be releasing their own findings soon. So I really encourage you to be on the lookout. As Angela mentioned, we just launched at the end of the year. And while, as you see here, a lot of the work is nonprofits and academic institutions, our goal is really to encourage the private sector to use this panel to fill their own polls to include the community in their research, with marketing and their comms plans as well. On the next slide. Thanks. So AAPI Data, one of the funders of the Amplify AAPI, wanted to bring Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders on equal footing with other racial groups when it comes to the wealth of available survey data. So they're doing these monthly polls, providing regular insights on different topics you see on this slide, like racial discrimination, personal finances, and top government issues. So I also encourage you to check out these findings at the link. It'll be monthly, and it's all the issues will be there. You can see the link at the bottom. I encourage you to go there. On the next slide. Here are some other examples of different types of questions that can be conducted. In our partnership with AARP, you see two types of questions that have recently been asked through our panel, one on finances and the other on caregiving. And again, these are just a subset of a whole battery of questions that AARP will release. But I just wanted to give you that sense of the actual question setup. So you can have yes or no questions, grids, multiple attributes, and open ends. Now on the right side, you'll see the Rockefeller Foundation provided a grant to NORC in support of building out the Amplify AAPI panel. As part of this grant, the foundation also conducted 2 surveys on food security and cultural relationships of food for their research on data equity and representation. Some of these questions are common questions, but never seen through the lens of the AA and NHPI community, or just questions that are geared at understanding the cultural nuances of the community. On the next slide. So here you can see the actual results of the questions that I just showed before about finances for ARP. And while the results are interesting, with more South and East Asians living comfortably than Southeast Asians and NHPI, just being able to make that headline comparing these groups is so unique and needed. I said earlier, I've been in the research industry for over 20 years, working with clients from all different industries, creating hundreds of reports. And honestly, I was never able to look at the data this way. As this continues to evolve through funding and doing your own research with this panel, we'll be able to look at this type of question across more specific Asian origins, again, with our rigorous best-in-class research methods. Amplify API has made, such progress over such a period of time, and I'm truly excited, to see this panel to grow, and hopefully have a chance to work with many of you on this webinar to strengthen the voice of the community and really just help tell more of our stories through survey research. So thank you. Slide.
Let me unmute. Thank you very much, Alex. I'm Dave Dutwin, Senior Vice President at NORC. I have been somewhat the principal architect of building the panel itself and trying to make this asset available for public use. So if we go to the next slide, I can talk a little bit about, I just want to take a little bit of a audible, if you will, and just mention a little bit about the panel right now. We are, again, able to support 1,000 interviews. Anyone interested in using the panel can reach out. We'll talk about that more in a bit to Alex, myself, and others. But the goal really is to ultimately be able to have people using the panel for surveys and market research and survey research on really a weekly basis. And secondarily, to be able to do that, not just for AANHPI overall, but for if people are interested in specific subgroups, be that subgroup by Asian origin or by other demographics, age. We've had requests for, can we do a study of caregivers? Can we do a study just of Chinese? Can we do a study just of people age 50 and older, or people who earn 100,000 or more? There's many, many ways to split data. And of course, a lot of people in the audience today are in market research, are very interested in segmentation of populations. We can do that. And the good news is we will be able to do that even more effectively come just a few short months from now. And I'll talk about that and why that's the case in a second. But before I get there, I wanted to talk about how to, quote unquote, support Amplify API. Generally, there's two ways. One is to use the panel, and another is to help invest into the panel. As was mentioned earlier, we have a little shy of 3,000 panelists right now. We're able to support surveys of 1,000 interviews, and we can really, if we put an all-out effort and max out to as much as maybe 1,500 interviews. But when you do 1,000 interviews, you're still going to have very small sample sizes of some of the smaller AANHPI groups, such as NHPI, Vietnamese, Korean, Japanese, etc. Our goal is to be able to have a panel that you can actually get reliable statistical estimates of all of those groups separately. And to do that, we really want the panel to have about 7,000 panelists. Panelists are not required to do surveys when we ask them to. It's strictly voluntary. So typically, if we have 7,000, we can support surveys of about 3,000 overall, which will allow us to get at least 300 interviews in all of these Asian subgroups, which allows you to be able to say something and do statistical analysis of that. So this slide is sort of representing Again, the two ways that you can support the panel, one by doing surveys, the two smallest arrows, if you will. We have a monthly survey that we run. That entry point is a $10,000 minimum for, I believe, 3 questions, plus you get all the demographics that we already have on panelists. And you can add questions up to, asking, I think, up to about 20 or 25 questions in one of those monthly surveys. If you want to do a standalone survey, say you have a longer survey, or you want to do just specific subgroups or specific age groups or what have you, we can field custom surveys on the panel. And then the 2 larger arrows talk about actually building infrastructure. Again, I'll get to this in the next slide. We're kind of a third of the way, a little over a third of the way in growing the panel to where we hope it will ultimately end up in terms of size and capability. So we're continually seeking funding. We have some great news in that we just won a major grant from an organization we'll be able to name and put on the website hopefully in a week or so. That grant was for $1 million, so we're going to be doing a lot of work in the next 3 months, specifically recruiting some of the smaller Asian subgroups. That's going to be the main focus of this grant, is to increase the sample sizes of NHPI, Japanese, Vietnamese, Korean, and even Filipino and Asian Indian to some extent. But others, we still need more. We certainly encourage people to offer support. That can be in terms of main infrastructure grants, or in the case of the gold large arrow here, in the case of this current grant, some of that money is going to go toward building and getting more panelists. And another portion of that grant is going to go to funding, lack of a better word, needy researchers, students, for early career professors and things like that. So there's a lot of different ways to help support the panel, again, ranging from investing in the panel to actually fielding surveys. So we encourage you to reach out to us and talk to us more about how you can utilize the panel. On the next slide, we just sort of outline a little bit where we're at and where we're going. Again, the overall panel goal is to get about 7,000 panelists. We have about 2,500 now. We hope that will end up being somewhere closer to 3,500 to 4,000 in about 6 months as we execute this grant that we just won to build the panel out further. Again, this is going to really help allow researchers to be able to do surveys that can disaggregate, that can look at major subgroups separately in comparison to each other, or do other interesting breakdowns like looking at doing a survey for specific states or specific demographics, etc. So we're really looking forward to that. A couple of years ago, what we considered year 1 was 2022, where we created a pilot study. We executed that pilot study. We figured out how to do this, basically. And by the way, how we do this is we use some pretty complicated data science to make predictions on all households in the United States as to whether they're AANHPI or not. If there's a high prediction, there's a high probability of selection. But every household, or the vast majority at least of households in the United States, have some probability of selection. So this is a very high quality, scientifically valid approach to recruiting. It's not done by convenience or by snowballing or any of these other techniques. This is true random sampling to get the highest quality possible, again, in multiple languages, and allowing people to respond across multiple modalities. If someone doesn't have internet, they can do a survey, they can become a panelist and do surveys by phone, etc. So last year we were lucky and gracious enough to get about $3 million in funding. Some of that was internal from NORC and AARP, as well as the Rockefeller Foundation, AAPI Data / UC Riverside, and the Blue Shield Foundation of California. Very grateful to those entities for supporting the panel. And we're now in a phase of trying to get additional funding to again round this out to 7,000, and we're doing pretty well. When we get to 7,000, we'll be able to really keep the panel at sort of a maintenance level. Won't need additional foundational support for growing the panel, but we'll be able to allow the panel to sort of maintain itself with the costs of doing surveys. So we're very excited. We're particularly excited for the next couple of months as we execute this large recruiting effort, sort of a phase 2 recruiting effort to really build out some of the better representation of some of the smaller groups. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to Bill. The next slide.
Well, thank you very much, David, and thank you all for being here. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A box because we'll be happy to answer them. But I'm Bill. I'm the chairman of IW Group. We're a multicultural advertising agency, and I've been involved with the Asian American Advertising Federation for more than 3 decades, and I'm currently on the advisory council for Amplify AAPIs. And earlier, after hearing from Vivian and Alex and Angela and David, I was talking about something that just came up. So I was on a panel with a leading researcher in the Hispanic community, a very prominent African-American advertising leader, and I was on this panel. And the discussion quickly went to how quickly the populations in the U.S. were growing. And this Hispanic gentleman said that Hispanics were the fastest growing segment of the U.S. population. And he compared the size of the Hispanic population to the population of Canada. There are more Latinos in the United States than there are people in the entire country of Canada. But I politely corrected him and said that Asian Americans are the fastest growing segment of the US population. And just to give you a little bit of context in this conversation, which quickly went to a black and a brown conversation, I had mentioned to the team that if we were to look at immigration, just in a few short decades, Asian Americans will be the largest immigrant population in the US. And what's fueling that? Immigration from key countries around the world. So just to give you an example of that discussion as it progressed, I said if we were to look at the Hispanic population in the US and around the world, and it's clearly a very important segment in the US, if you were to put all the Latinos in the Caribbean, in the US and Canada, Mexico and Central America and South America, and we threw in Brazil and even the country of Brazil, it would be less than 1 billion people. And a lot of people were talking about the importance of Africa, which has more than 50 countries, as well as the African diaspora and other parts of the world. Africa in total would be about 1.3 billion people. And just to give you a little texture, China has 1.3 billion people. So there are just as many Chinese in China as there are in the entire Africans and people in North Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa for the entire continent, which is 1.3 billion. And India is 1.4 billion. And Asia as a whole is 4.6 billion people. So where's the immigration going to come from? Most likely from Asia. And so we are the fastest growing population. We've grown by double digits in 49 out of 50 states. But one thing that I also need to mention is this, why we need such disaggregated data is a lot of times we are, as Alex mentioned, perpetuated or described by stereotypes and tropes. And a lot of people think that Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders don't need any assistance. One thing that is really important once we get more data is that we'll be able to show some of the disaggregated data that separates us from all the other communities. And even though a lot of people think Asian Americans are wealthy, we have the largest income gap of all communities in this country today. So why is disaggregated data so important? It's because it impacts so many different companies, foundations, and governmental agencies. And we represent QSR, we represent packaged good companies, automotive, and every single year I get the same question from many of the companies. Where is the disaggregated data? And for 30 plus years, we've been asking for more disaggregated data. that focuses not only on culture, but also on language. And this program, Amplify AAPI in NORC, offers a great opportunity. Right now, they have 2,500 people in their panel. We want to get to 7,000. Based on what David and Alex and Angela and Vivian said, we need to get a larger pool. And the pool's pretty good now. So if you want to try to do something now, you can. But if we can get to 7,000, that will give us a really great representative sample of panelists. And we need to do that with some support. Now, we got support from 2 foundations, which will be named later, in addition to AARP and Rockefeller Center, but we still need a few more million to get to that 7,000 number of panelists. So I want to encourage you, if you have an opportunity to help us raise that money so we can get to this 7,000 level, that would be great. And I want to go to the next slide because I want to just show you the support that the group has already garnered. Most of the major national Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander groups are supporting this because not only do we need the disaggregated data to support what the companies and the marketers and the governmental agencies are doing, but we need this data for a variety of other reasons: healthcare issues, government services, even voting. And so these are just a few examples of the nonprofits and national organizations, corporations, and foundations that are already supporting this. So I encourage you to participate in this program. If you want to start, you can talk to David or you can talk to any of the NORC folks. But if you can also find a way to contribute so that we can get to the 7,000 number, that would be great. And I'm going to turn the floor over to Token Duan, who's going to open up for Q&A.
Thank you so much, Bill, and thank you so much to our incredible panelists for sharing their insights and expertise with us today. We've had a truly engaging discussion and have learned so much from each of you. Before we move into the Q&A portion, I invite everyone to submit their questions directly in the Q&A box on Zoom if you haven't already done so. My first question is a question that we're getting from a number of you, which I actually know the answer to, so I'm just going to answer it, which is, will the recording and/or deck be made available? And the answer is yes. Our team will be following up once this webinar wrapped up with the recording as well as the deck and also the statistics that was mentioned during our conversation today. So the second question is, what is the makeup of the survey panel? And I'll hand it over to our panelists.
Yeah. So right now we kind of see the building of the panel as having 2 phases, which we've completed phase 1 and we're moving into phase 2 right now. Phase 1, the goal was to get a nationally representative sample of AANHPI overall. So we could do surveys between 1,000 and 1,500 interviews nationwide that is representative. So we look at metrics, again, starting with Asian subgroup, Chinese, Asian American, Filipino on down, and we're represented by that as well. We look at demographics, we look at language capabilities, ability to speak language at home, foreign born versus US born. The panel is broadly representative by all of these metrics. Moving into phase 2, we're actually in some ways oddly going to try and make the panel a little less representative by buttressing again those smaller Asian American groups. Don't worry about that statement because as you probably all know, every survey on the planet that's ever been conducted for the last 80 years since survey research started uses survey weights to adjust metrics that might not be spot on to national estimates. And so as we build out the ability to get more sample size of these smaller groups, again, Vietnamese, Korean, Japanese, NHPI, we want those groups to be larger than their share in the population so that if someone comes along and says, I want to do 300, 400 interviews of Vietnamese, we're going to be able to do that. Again, survey weighting will weight them down to their proper proportion when we do a nationally representative survey. But that's what phase 2 is all about. And again, that is starting right now with this new grant, and hopefully within 3 months we will be able to have the ability of doing something closer to 2,000 to 2,500 interviews maximum overall, with at least 250 interviews by 7 major subgroups.
Thank you so much, David. And I think we mentioned this a few times, but another question that came in just for clarity is, can government institutions use this panel, or is it for private organization only?
Yeah, Alex, you want to take that?
Yeah, it's open, as I mentioned before, it's open to academics, government, private sector. We encourage everyone to participate to, so create more representation, or so our voices can be heard. So it's open to everyone.
And I just wanted to throw, I was trying to peek here at our slide deck and just making sure we have the website somewhere there, but verbally it is amplifyaapi.norc.org. That has a page that gives pricing, that gives some information about the panel. It has some great videos on there, so I really encourage people to check that out. If you're interested in using the panel for research, that's the first place to start.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dave. And we actually have a follow-up question to that is, if I'd like to do a survey, what are my next steps and how long will it take?
Yeah, I can start with that, and then David, you can add some details. So I mentioned before, for our monthly poll, it's 5 weeks. So using as a real example, we'd want to get your questions in, questions in by April 18th. We'd feel the period would be May 7th to the 15th, and you get your standard deliverables on May 22nd. So that's that 5-week timeframe.
Yeah, and again, on the website, there's a capabilities page, and if you scroll down on that page, there's a link for our monthly schedule. So if you're interested in fielding questions, but you're not ready to go yet, maybe you think you'll be ready in the late summer, you can just look at that calendar and you'll see exactly what timing you need to conform to get your questions in for a specific monthly survey.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Alex. We have a question here from the audience about, is there a way to get access to the notes without having to use Otter? We will be sending the recording and the deck, but I don't think we'll be sending the notes, unfortunately. If you do have any particular questions about the use of the panel or information from our panelists today, we'll be happy to follow up. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, everyone. Are there any final closing questions or thoughts? Otherwise, we will just hand it over to the panelists as we wrap up. What is the final thought we want to leave for our audience today, I would say?
I would throw out, I know probably there's some folks in the audience that have done some research of AANHPI. Typically, research at this point has been done with online panels. It's interesting, I just went to the Quirks conference and the Insights Association conference, and just really amazed at how it seemed like there was only one topic people wanted to talk about, and that was bots, falsified data, fake respondents. Unfortunately, we have a crisis in convenience panels where upwards to half of the respondents that some people have reported in their survey were actually bots, were actually fake generated responses. People, are sort of breaking the system to get money. They get paid $5 per survey. They create a bot that answers, 200 surveys, and lo and behold, they've made $1,000, right? And your research is useless because of that. Again, I want to stress, there is no such problem with this panel. We recruit people straight from randomized U.S. Postal Service. We talk to them on the phone. These are real people doing real research. And the quality of this panel is just a complete different field. So really, encourage you to utilize this panel for research again, because not just because of what it's doing to serve the community, doing it both in 4 different languages, but also because it's just a really high quality panel that you're not going to have to worry about those sorts of issues with.
Yeah, adding to that, because I just came from that online non-probability world, it's a real problem. We would have 40% frauds, and we would require a lot of our staff to, the only way to is look through open ends. And even now the AI and the bots are getting smart to figure out a way around that. So it was frightening and was really scary because it affected our at that for the agencies and those that use the online panels. It's the way of life. So it's true.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you, David.
Yeah.
We have another question that came through is, when will the data be available, even before the interviews is completed in year 3? And I think this varies with different companies as an organization as you're working with them, but we'd love to hear more about that process.
Yeah, so this is sometimes a bit of a confusion, even though it's probably our fault. We are continuing to build the panel, but notably the panel is operating. It is working right now. We have been fielding monthly surveys for about 6 months now. So if you want to do research, you can contact us tomorrow and do research, and based on the schedule, that 5-week from start to finish of getting us questions to getting us data, you will have data essentially 5 weeks from now. If you add questions to the panel right now. And I did want to just add, we had another note in the chat about translation and cultural adaptation. We have very lucky to have a great advisory council, of which Bill is a part of, and a number of other notable researchers and folks across different communities. And we also have great internal resources. Lisa Lee is a renowned methodologist who's done quite a bit of research in Asian communities. So when we get questions, we always make sure that there's sort of an appropriateness. They're worded well. They're going to work for all the communities involved that we're going to be asking questions toward. So we do that as a standard practice. We review everything with that kind of lens. And we support the translation ourselves. So you can just give us questions in English. We'll provide them back to you in Vietnamese, Korean, Mandarin, and Cantonese.
Awesome, David. We have actually a series of other questions coming in right now. If we add questions, can we geo-target some questions, or would this be on a national scale?
Yeah, we know when people join the panel, they give us a fair amount of information from again, languages spoken at homes, Asian subgroups, even some political and health questions, as well as confirming their address. Again, we sample people by actually mailing to them initially, so we know exactly where they live. And we've already done surveys that we did a survey that was California only, et cetera. So yeah, we're able to do that. No problem.
Wonderful. One final question we have is, can you please clarify the difference between using Amplify API as a poll versus a survey?
Really, I mean, they're just, we kind of treat that as those as synonyms. I mean, poll or survey, either way, we're fielding, a random sample, number of questions and providing those data back. So we really consider that kind of the one and the same.
I'll just chime in. I think we have maybe used the language of monthly poll, which is kind of like the ongoing monthly, but there's also the ability to do a custom survey, right, David? Couldn't you also do a custom?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Again, why would you do a custom survey? Number one, maybe you want more than 1,000 interviews. Number two, maybe you don't want a general population survey of AANHPI. You want to do just specific subgroups or an age cohort or whatever. Or number three, you have 20 minutes of questions you want to ask. And really, our monthly survey, multiple clients contribute to that survey. We tend to not be able to accommodate folks who want to do more than 8 or 9 or 10 minutes in that monthly survey. So if you have 15 to 20 minutes of questions, you probably want to just do your own standalone custom survey. But again, just talk to us and we'll help you navigate through all of that.
Thank you for that clarity, everyone. Oh, with 4 minutes left, I would love to turn this over to Vivian for a closeout.
Thank you, Toqueen. Just wanted to share a little bit of how to be a champion for this work. right? Because it's really, really exciting to be at this stage where we even have the possibility to explore and get more insights about this community, which I feel like we've all can relate to the struggle of like trying to get better data. And now we have the capacity, but there's still work that is needed to champion this work in your respective fields. And I want to say that there is a lot of momentum, and this is something that, you know, we went through the process ourselves, like championing this work at the foundation, is that we are at this point where you can see it in terms of it appearing in the news, in terms of it being a priority for the White House, right? And then all of even the Amplify, the AAPI data, the polls that are getting picked up monthly in the news, right? So being able to just actually show the trends that this is something that is happening in the broader ecosystem, in the broader society, really helps align and get that closer to saying like, this is why it's important. And like, we're really at the right timing for that. So just wanted to leave on that note that it's really exciting. And we're seeing it in our society, like being a priority, so that we're really at this right timing where you can champion this work. And thank you everyone so much for all the efforts getting us here.
What a great way to close this out. Thank you so much, Vivian. Thank you so much to our panelists and everyone who tuned in today. Always, we'll follow up with the recording as well as the deck and also contact information from our colleagues over at NARC if you are interested in starting a poll right away or have questions on how to be a partner. All right. Thank you so much, everyone.